Hello, everybody. I got Joey Shorts with me back today. He's done a video with me already, and actually just released a clip from that video on my channel today about how Joey nailed it when it comes to budgeting on the carnivore diet. So check that out. Joey, thanks so much for coming back. I just want to say I'm a huge fan of your content. It's super refreshing. I love it coming from such a young mind, and just you just nail everything, just every aspect that you've gone into. You can just tell there's a high degree of intelligence there and a lot of common sense as well. So I want to break down today some of the myths and some of the arguments that vegans make against carnivores or just eating meat in general, right?
Mhm.
And to me, I've never been able to wrap my head around it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. If you look at it from an ancestral point of view, or if you look at our history and evolution, it just doesn't add up. So I think that's the first point I'd like to get to. Modern science, right? Science, in terms of what we get from this nutrition science coming from big pharma, and corporate interests
Mhm.
versus evolution. Where's the disconnect there? And how do you think this disconnect happened?
Yeah. So when people are supporting a plant-based agenda, there are two ways they can look at our evolution. Number one, they can concede to the fact that humans are carnivores. Okay, cool. If they do that, then we won. Because all that you need to do is you need to look into nature because humans are just another biological aspect of nature. When any animal eats the diet that they've evolved eating, like lions eating gazelles or our primate ancestors eating, leaves, right? They don't get the Western illnesses that we get. Humans are no anomaly. Humans eating our natural diet will not get the Western illnesses that we're currently burdened by. So, which is why you see people go carnivore and all of these issues that they have completely reverse in many cases. So, but then there's a different avenue that they take. And sometimes they'll say, okay, humans are not carnivores. Humans are herbivores, and it's the influx of meat consumption that's causing all these Western issues. And to that, I say that's wrong. And there's so much quality evidence that humans are carnivores. And some of that evidence lies in, for example, bioenergetics. So humans could not have possibly gotten all of our energy from going around and eating all day because we would have had to do just that. We would have had to spend all of our time going and eating plants and leaves and running around looking for plants constantly. And in doing so, it would have taken away too much time that we could have devoted to, that we did devote to education, childcare, creating tools, expanding as a species, right? There's no way that humans were going around eating plants that whole time. It doesn't make any sense. Now, also the expensive tissue hypothesis. This is a big one. Everyone talks about how our brain increased, our brain size increased, and our gut got smaller because our energy demands increased. We, you know, our brain increased due to eating more meat, and when we stopped eating meat, our brains got smaller. It went from 1500 cc to 1300 cc in just a matter of like 8,000 years. This is because we're eating plants. And also, if you look at the Paleolithic times and then the Neolithic times, the difference is that we used to be about 6'3". Now we're something like 5'8". We got a lot shorter. We got a lot weaker. Our jaws are completely destroyed now. Our teeth are messed up. We get our wisdom teeth taken out. I mean, there's something that's not going right with us right now. Also, we're highly adapted to a high fat diet. I mean, we can't digest fiber. It's insoluble. We just poop it out. So it's very clear that human physiology is well adapted to eating lots of fat. We can rapidly enter ketosis. We do better in ketosis when we're eating lots of fat, especially animal fat. And it's safe to say that because we are so capable of getting into ketosis so fast and with such a high degree of efficacy, then it's what we do best on. It's what we've been doing for a long period of time. Next, the bioavailability of nutrients, right? There are no plants that have nutrients that are more bioavailable than within meat. Like vitamin A, for example, you have beta carotene, which is in plants, which has a terrible conversion rate to actual retinol, which is the usable form of vitamin A. Same with vitamin D, right? We can get D2 from plants, but it doesn't really convert to D3 very well. And then you have all these other things that just aren't good at converting from their plant form to the bioavailable form. Not to mention the phytic acid, the lectins, the oxalates that all bind to the nutrients and prevent the absorption of them. So when you're looking at a plant-based thing and it says this much potassium or this much of this micronutrient, it's wrong because it's not taking into account the abundance of micronutrients as well as the bioavailability. And then also omega-3 oils. I mean, this is extremely significant. You have things like flax seeds and chia seeds that plant-based people say are good sources of omega-3. They're ALA. They don't convert to DHA or EPA, which is the only omega-3 that we can actually use. It's like a tiny percentage that converts. So this doesn't make sense either. How about stomach acidity? We have the pH of a carnivore is 2.2. Humans are 1.5 to 2. So our stomach acidity is well accustomed with that of a scavenger that's going around eating lots of meat, even meat that's been out for a long time. You know, our chewing apparatus, right? This is all synonymous with that of a carnivore. Our bodies, you know, we've gathered the ability to throw things, to throw spears. You know, the age at which babies stop consuming breast milk. Most herbivorous primates stop between 4.5 and 8. We stop at between 2.5 and 2.8, which is what other carnivores do. You know, there are all these things, right? Like there's a lot more, but there are all these things that point us in the direction of being carnivores. And if we know that carnivore is the ancestral human diet, then there are no more questions that need to be asked because, like I mentioned at the beginning, all we do is we look into nature and we see what happens when animals eat their natural diet and when they deviate from it. I have a dog that has been fed grains her whole life, and she has heart disease, she has heart issues because she's a carnivore, just like humans, right? Humans are fed grains and we get heart issues as well. No different than my dog. We're deviating from it. We're deviating from our natural diet that would otherwise ensure good health, right? As it hasn't proven to do so, right? There's a Maasai woman that lived to 122. There's Native Americans chiefs that are living to 120, that live to 120. There's historical evidence that the people who, you know, societies that ate a lot of meat did very well. There was just a 2022 study showing a correlation between meat consumption and longevity. We know that eating meat is good for us because it's our ancestral diet. So the vegans who take, you know, either one of the approaches, they're easily debunked. They say that we're not carnivores. Well, we are. They concede that we are carnivores. Well, the work is done because if we know that it's our ancestral diet, there's nothing more that needs to be said.
So why is it that we are the only species on the planet where it is recommended to stray from our natural diet? You know, cows eat grass, chickens eat bugs. Humans are designed through natural selection to eat meat. Why is it that where does this notion come from that what's best for us is to completely reverse that and eat something that isn't part of our evolution?
Because we know so much to the point that we almost know nothing now. If you look back, like in the medieval times, I was actually having a talk with Dr. Anthony Chafee about this yesterday. You know, you had the Romans who were eating grains to fatten up, so when they would get stabbed for war, it wouldn't get into their organs. So they would get fat on purpose, eating grains. So when they were stabbed, they wouldn't die from the stabbing. And you know, we knew things back then. We knew what eating plants would do. We knew that eating plants was a starvation food that causes infertility and so forth. But now, well, what's happening is we're basically building so much. Like our ancestors learned so much, and we're just getting more and more and more knowledge to the point that there's almost too much of it. I mean, people are so there's too much to choose from. There's too many lies mixed with the truth, and it's not that we've gotten too smart for our own good, but there's just too much out there. You know, there's and then that's not to mention the obscene amount of money that you know, the plant-based agenda generates. The whole healthcare system is predicated on it. It's completely founded on it. It's vital. I mean, you have like something like 19 million doctors or like people in the healthcare industry in the United States. It's a massive number. I don't know exactly what it is, but these people essentially lose their jobs when the plant-based agenda dies because they're not really needed anymore. And of course, not all of them will lose their jobs, and there's some times where people get in accidents and such. But this our health epidemic is predicated on eating plants, and so it's and then you also have the sugar companies and the pharmaceutical companies who they're the ones with the money. They're the ones who control the science. They fund the studies. And so it's a combination of money being the motive of these large companies, in addition to humans just getting so much information, so much technology, so much advancement that it's almost detracted us from the truth. It's circumvented our ability to really understand and conceptualize reality.
Yeah, exactly. Well, over 2000 years ago, Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine, right?
Yeah.
All disease begins in the gut. And we strayed so far from that, we've compartmentalized our medicine to all these different groups as if our stomach is completely disconnected from our brains and everything else for that matter. So, but what vegans always have to turn to, so, okay, they can't turn to evolution. Okay, they
Mm-hmm.
can't turn to our ancestry or anything. What they always turn to is the science. I have a million studies showing that vegan foods are the best, and meat's going to kill you, meat's going to give you cancer, meat's going to give you a heart attack, meat's whatever. I mean, it's going to damage your kidneys and blah, blah, blah. So what is fueling these interests for the sites? We always hear about vegans talking about how bad the beef industry is. The beef industry is so corrupt and they're making us all sick.
Mm-hmm.
What about on the vegan side of that? What is fueling their sort of agenda?
Um, they've brainwashed themselves, they've deluded themselves into thinking that meat is um, you know, immoral, unethical to eat. And it's not even that they've deluded themselves, it's that they've been lied to by, the big industries. I remember in sixth grade, um, I think our science teacher showed us one of those documentaries where they just kill it's like a feedlot. And it was terrible. Like it's a bad documentary, especially for a young person to watch. So a lot of people turned vegan at that point. I remember that. It was a lot of like my sixth grade class that went vegan after that.
Oh yeah,
And
all those Netflix documentaries are so
yeah,
anti-meat, and they're all vegan, pharmaceutical produced documentaries.
yeah, and of course everything was taken way out of proportion with those documentaries, but that's really what it comes from. And not only that, but there's also this societal pressure in a lot of areas to do the right thing and not eating meat. It's like a guilt that's weighing on people right now, and a lot of these vegans. I mean, from what I found, it's like just having conversations with a lot of different vegans and understanding what they're coming from, where they're coming from. It comes from a point of ethics rather than health. That's what I've sort of found. Because whenever I have that conversation, they always slip out. Oh, you're just eating a rotting piece of flesh and you're putting it down your throat, and you had to put a bullet in a cow's head and watch it bleed to death, bleed out on the floor, and take its carcass. Or like they get all into these graphic things, and you can tell that they're so disturbed by the idea of eating meat as a function of poor ethics. Like that's why they're upset. And their whole point is completely illogical, because it's too nearsighted. What they're doing is they think that because they're not eating the flesh of an animal, that they don't have the blood of animals on their hands, which is wrong, because they certainly do. They have the blood of so many more animals on their hands than I do. I kill a couple cows and a few chickens per year, and I do that to stay in good health because it's a fully natural cycle. And I eat grass-fed cows that are sustainably raised, lived a good life, hopefully through regenerative farming. But if not, that's okay too, right? So I don't have many deaths on my hand. I'm supporting farmers. I'm not destroying the environment. It's a fully natural process. There were 100 million ruminants before Columbus came, and now there are about 100 million cows. They're not harming the environment. They've always been here. So I'm not killing that many animals, but the vegans, when they're eating salads every day and tons of rice and stuff, they're killing thousands of animals. I mean, moles, rats, foxes, mice, squirrels, everything that would have been in that environment is completely destroyed due to the vegan agenda, not to mention the water that they're using up when they drink their almond milk. It's ridiculous the amount of water that they're using. Like cows drink water that falls onto the grass. Vegans drink water that isn't green, that's taken and then used to put on the plants to irrigate the crops. So they they have there's this misconception that eating meat is unethical because you're eating the flesh of an animal. But people don't realize that the vegans are killing way more animals than we are, and they view it too myopically to actually understand it. I mean, they'd rather just not think that because they're not eating animals, but it's just so false.
Absolutely. And let's touch base on where the interests lie in terms of sort of the vegan, where the vegan science comes from, all this
Mm,
anti-meat propaganda.
yeah.
I'm just going to share a study here. I'm sure you've probably seen this one. I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. So this is a study from the European Council on Atherosclerosis,
Hmm.
saying that saturated fat is causal in atherosclerosis. Now, I just want you guys to look at the conflicts of interest here, okay? Can you see this, Joey?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You look through here, I mean, it's
Oh my
basically
God.
every pharmaceutical company on the planet, right?
Yeah.
The directors of the study have all been funded from Pfizer and other companies. Look, it just keeps going. Look at this. I've never seen so many conflicts of interest in my entire life in one study. And I'll show you the top of the study. This is their big proclamation here, right? LDL causes atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, evidence from genetic, epidemiologic, and clinical studies, a consensus statement from the European Atherosclerosis Society panel, right? So the self-proclaimed panel. So why is the pharmaceutical industry so interested in our agriculture? Why are they buying up all of our agriculture? Why are they buying up Monsanto? Why are they buying up Syngenta? Why are they buying up all the agrichem companies? And you know, I've actually done a bit of research in terms of the pharmaceutical industry lobbyists, and they actually have the largest lobbyist group in the world. You know who was second? According
Mm.
to the study I looked at, the oil industry by less than half of what the pharmaceutical industry spends on their lobbying. Okay. So maybe you could touch base a little bit on that in terms of, where all this garbage comes from. Is the beef industry as big as the pharmaceutical industry and vegan associations and everything, and everything combined, because as far as I know, there isn't really a one-stop shop in terms of beef associations or anything like that. They're all kind of split up into a bunch of subgroups, right?
Mm.
So yeah, if you could just sort of comment on that, I'm just interested to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, so here's what I think. I think that I know that the pharmaceutical company makes a ton of money from the idea that LDL is a risk factor for heart disease. Because then they can do all their LDL lowering drugs. And like you may, push back and say, well, we know that eating a lot of plants and not saturated fat lowers LDL. It most certainly does. But I think what the pharmaceutical companies know is that humans won't stop eating meat. So they can keep their agenda going. They can keep pushing LDL lowering medication in a plant-based diet because what it's doing is it's not preventing people from eating meat. They know that people love to eat meat. They just want to keep people with the idea that their LDL cholesterol is a huge issue. Although, of course, it isn't. I think there really is um I've had sort of trouble grappling with this idea of, do they know what they're doing? I mean, is this really deliberate? Is there somebody at the top of some pharmaceutical company that knows the truth and wants to keep furthering a plant-based agenda because they're making a lot of money from it, which they certainly do. And to be honest, I I'm not certain, but I think that there are people in the system um who are conscious that a plant-based diet is keeping them in business. And I think that maybe maybe that is what's happening. I mean, well, do you think that's the case?
Well, yeah, but so what is their why are they so interested in our agriculture, right? How did this connection get made? Why is it that we have like Bayer buying Monsanto, right? I mean, how did all these companies get in there? We had, what is it, AstraZeneca
Yeah,
bought Syngenta, or started, I think, Syngenta. I mean, and they're really getting into the agrochemical companies and everything, ChemChina. How did that connection get made? I don't understand where the interest is there, aside from maybe just them profiting at every turn. I mean, if they control our agriculture, right? They control the science around our diet in terms of trying to shift us away from a natural diet,
yeah,
right? Trying to get us onto genetically modified foods to feed the world. They're doing a good thing according to what they say. And we've seen health outcomes just deteriorate over time, just
yeah.
gradually get worse and worse and worse. I mean, cancer rates keep going up, and diabetes and autoimmunity and everything else. But I guess I'm just sort of interested in that connection. Why are they so interested in buying up our agriculture?
I think that this is a message that a lot of people like to hear. You know, a lot
It's
of people
plant
have,
agriculture, by the way. I'm not talking about animal agriculture.
yeah,
I'm talking about the likes of Monsanto here, which does feed part of our animal agriculture, but it's very different thing, right?
yeah. I think people like the demonization of animal agriculture and they like the glorification of plant agriculture.
Mhm.
And they have their preconceived notions, which all ties back to what animal agriculture consists of, what eating meat does to the body. They have these ideas, and they're very much inclined to think that plant agriculture is something that's good for everyone. And I'm trying to okay, so what does that inclination mean? I mean, why does it matter that people want to believe that plants are good for us and that plant agriculture is a great thing? What's the significance? Well, what we see is that companies like to feed that. I mean, companies, when they have a financial interest, like to feed into those inclinations and desires, for what people believe. And you see that in all facets of life, right? I mean, if a society sort of is moving towards this one belief, you're going to see um, different companies and businesses catering to those interests so they can turn a profit. And at this point, it's become so plant-based in our ideology, which is why you see all the plant-based companies emerging. I mean, they wouldn't emerge if there was no growing demand for it. They come as a result of the propaganda that's brainwashing people into thinking that meat is bad and plants are good. These things are all stemming from this overall move towards plant-based eating. And the companies are just finding a way to profit from it. And they're telling us what we want to hear.
Exactly. And what about in terms of, let's get into fats a little bit here, right? Because we've really shifted over into like seed oils and uh, all these sort of plant-based oils that are packaged up from God knows where and
Yeah.
line our grocery store shelves. And meat fat, like it's pretty hard now to find stuff like tallow and lard and what we've always eaten. What is
Mhm.
sort of the science on that? And are there any sort of adverse health outcomes based on our switch to these plant-based oils instead of meat fat?
Yeah. Well, you're totally right. We were eating butter and lard. I mean, that's what comprised most of our animal fats. I was doing all this research into where we got our fats. And it was all saturated animal fats up until about World War II. And then you have Procter and Gamble who made Crisco, which might have been one of the greatest catastrophes in United States history because that's what really sent us into a spiral and a downward spiral. Then you have refined grains, and I think the 1880s. And it's at this point that the correlations, they really start becoming more pronounced. I mean, I think um there was what's his name? Um the guy in like the early 1900s who did all the testing. It was this one scientist who started feeding mice saturated fat versus vegetable oil because Weston Price. So he knew that vegetable oils were causing extreme harm. He gave two different rats either saturated fat or vegetable oil. The one that was given saturated fat lived twice as long and got twice as big as the one that ate vegetable oil. And then, it was at this point that, um, ironically enough, despite the work that was being done and people who were fighting against the addition of vegetable oils, that they really became mainstream. And, then you have Ansel Keys, who in the 50s and 60s is saying that vegetable oils need to be adopted. They need to be part of the human diet. And, the correlation is so obvious. I mean, you look at the charts, it's just vegetable oil and cancer. I mean, they're just right in line with each other, and there's mechanistic data as to why cancer can be caused by vegetable oil consumption. I mean, I was watching a video on exactly what vegetable oil does, and I don't know exactly, I can't do it exactly off the top of my head, but it's something like omega-6 creates these reactive oxygen species. And then what happens is this destroys the electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation, which is how we oxidize nutrients for energy. And this is responsible for 90% of our energy. So when oxidative phosphorylation and the electron transport chain fail, we basically have no more energy. This destroys the cardiolipin, and we can no longer accept glucose and fatty acids. And we're basically put in this state where we can no longer oxidize our fat for fuel. We get extremely fat, insulin resistant. I mean, these vegetable oils are really the worst thing that you can put into your body. They're really, really bad. And the fact that they were recommended for such a long period of time, it wasn't until somewhat recently, maybe they're even still recommended on the American Heart Association website, but I know that the American Heart Association recently said that saturated fat might be okay to consume. But just the fact that this stuff is still recommended, despite what it's done, what it's been proven to do, and what it's so strongly associated with, it's baffling. I mean, if you look through our history, the association between heart disease and saturated fat is not there. We need to dismiss it as a causal factor.
Mhm.
What is there is the association between heart disease, cancer, all this stuff, and vegetable oils, seed oils, the most toxic things on earth. I mean, this stuff is in baby formula. This stuff is in everything, and it's really, really killing us. And yeah, I think that's one of the, if you ask me, the advent of Crisco is one of just the greatest catastrophes in recent human history.
No, absolutely. And it's just an amazing story when you really look at the history behind it. And in your most recent video, I saw that you mentioned Kellogg really getting
Yeah,
involved in a lot of this plant-based propaganda as well. And it's just absolute corporate interest drivel.
100%.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. I mean, uh, the plant-based agenda is essentially founded on a desire for infertility. I mean, that's really what it is. That this is what Kellogg wanted. He didn't want people masturbating, so he said, eat grains so you can get rid of this sin. That like this is what veganism is founded on. And same with the Seventh-day Adventists. I mean, they don't want they're feeding people slave food, so they don't have a desire to reproduce and procreate. And it's just crazy, and it makes so much sense evolutionarily, where you have the peasants eating the grains and you have the rich people eating the meat. And what's happened is it's reversed to a degree, where the rich people are intentionally eating the slave food, and it's just so ridiculous. Like
it's
it's so
amazing.
strange.
Isn't
It's
it
crazy.
amazing, right? It's
It's crazy.
you go to a restaurant. I mean, a lot of these, if you these posh areas, at least I go to, that I go to once in a while, they have all these restaurants, and there's like acai bowls, and
Yeah.
everything is vegan now, and they charge a fortune for these, like, these oat bites and stuff. And this is what all these rich people are eating. you
Yeah.
know? And
Oh, bites. It's
it's so
insane.
true, though. I mean, is that something that's ancestrally speaking? I mean, would we pass up an animal for an oat bite or an acai bowl?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, would be, is there any other food that we could sustain ourselves on aside from meat? I mean, aside from sort of ruminant, animals. I mean, could we sustain ourselves on any single source plant food that you know of?
No. Oh, absolutely not. Even all plant foods combined, we can't sustain ourselves on because they don't have essential nutrients. I mean, there's so many edible plant foods, and this is what I talk to people about a lot. When people say vegan diet is restrictive, it's not restrictive at all. There's so many plant foods. There's like hundreds, maybe thousands of them in the grocery stores that you can eat. It's not that it's restrictive, it's that it's lacking in essential nutrients. I mean, people say, I had to leave my vegan diet because it was too restrictive, and no, it's not too restrictive. It's that your body was craving animal foods. You were dying to get animal foods, and so you switched over to, the 10 animal foods that are out there that you can eat. It's not that you were restricted in, in terms of novel, like the amount of stuff that you could have. It's that you were missing stuff that was in the minority of foods that, you weren't eating. And, yeah, so we can't sustain ourselves on plant foods, definitely not. And if we did, in our history, all the potato famines, I mean, you know, we we the plants are for times of starvation. That's what it's been for our, that's what it's always been like throughout the entire evolutionary history of humans and pre-humans. Plants are starvation foods. We're not supposed to eat them when there's lots of meat around. We would have never done it. It doesn't make any sense. Our ancestors knew that, it aligns with our ancestry, but we don't know it. I mean, we're intentionally eating grains when we should be eating meat, and it's just so bizarre.
Yeah, I can't imagine our ancestors ever passing up you know, a bison for a head of broccoli and carrots,
Oh,
but
yeah.
maybe it's just me. But apparently our ancestors were all wrong and suicidal.
So,
But so are you, just out of curiosity, in terms of your own personal taste, are you mostly just eating red meat, or do you believe that you could incorporate other meat like chicken or fish as well into a healthy carnivore diet?
I eat some chicken sometimes just because I like it, and I grew up eating so much chicken. I mean, we were just eating so much chicken throughout my whole childhood. So I've grown to really like it. And sometimes we'll just throw whole chickens in the oven, and I really like chicken. So I eat it maybe, once every couple of weeks or so, but I don't feel as good as when I eat beef. And it's not that I feel bad. It's just I feel so great all the time eating beef, and it's just a slight downgrade when I have chicken. I know that there's, more omega-6 and they're fed soy and corn and other grains, so
Mhm.
suboptimal for sure. But it's it's such an upgrade from eating plants. I mean,
Yeah.
eating any animal, it's just a whole different world
Yeah.
of health. And every now and then I'll crave salmon, um, sometimes I'll want oysters or just like something weird, and I'll just satisfy the craving. I also do have goat yogurt sometimes, which has some carbohydrates in it. But yeah, so those are sort of the things that I have that are uh, not really in total alignment with the carnivore recommendations that some people make, just
Mhm.
beef. But I don't have salt, which is, something that's different than what most people do. I don't have salt. But
Oh,
yeah,
neither do
so
I. I don't
yeah,
salt my meat anymore.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's not really necessary. I mean, your body adapts to not having it, and there's plenty of sodium in the meat, so there's not really a good reason to, in my opinion.
I agree. After my first month, I cut out salt and I felt way better. In fact, my electrolyte
Yeah,
balances actually were much better when I cut salt out.
yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so I kind of, maybe I might spin this off into a different video, but there's something that we touched on before all this
Hmm.
that really weighs heavily on me personally, and I think we need to address it. And I don't see a lot of carnivores addressing this.
Hmm.
The pharmaceutical industry and big agro have really targeted children, you know, and I think that one thing that I think is absolutely criminal is when you see people putting their kids, especially babies, on plant-based diets.
Yeah.
In fact, you mentioned that there was a case recently about a woman who put her daughter, I believe, on a plant-based diet, and she died, and they charged her with manslaughter,
She got life in prison.
life in prison. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it you need cholesterol, you need saturated fat. They are dumping these seed oils in every kid's food. When I go to my daughter's daycare, all the kids are just loaded up with goldfish and granola bars
Yeah.
and juice boxes and chips, veggie chips, that they think are healthy. And then you look at them, they have canola oil, sunflower oil, whatever other kind of seed oils.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on this? And, do you think that there's some kind of deliberate attempt to make our kids fat and sick? Or is it purely just we want them to just be loaded up on these processed foods and it's just for corporate profit? Like what is the thing going on here? I know you touch base on baby formula,
Yeah.
which is like toxic soup, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really sad. I know, I know a fair amount of, I mean, yeah, as you would expect. I'm in LA. I know a lot of vegans. Um, I can see what happens to them. I know a lot of parents who go vegan and tell their kids to do it too because they're just so misinformed. And it really is criminal. I mean, in a way, you can compare it to the way that tobacco companies have advertised their Juul products, their e-cigarettes to teenagers, right? Because the bright colors and the fruity names that they put on it. I mean, the is it deliberate? I don't know, but it really looks like it. I mean, it really, really seems like it is because the way that, a lot of this stuff is advertised, it's done so in a way that seems to really appeal to children. I mean, it appeals to people in general, but really, really, much more to children. You know, children children don't have much self-control, right? They don't have that much. And so what happens is at a young age, they think that sugar tastes really good to them. So they start eating a lot of sugar. And that's when the cycle really starts because now they're addicted to sugar throughout their childhood and they're becoming mentally ill because of it. Things like ADHD are developing, anxiety is developing because of the sheer amount of sugar and seed oils that they're eating. So they're plummeting even further into this process where they're dependent on this stuff now, these hyper palatable foods like sugar, like seed oils, or not the seed oils themselves, but the things that seed oils are infused into. And it's just a really, really diabolical process because what's happening is they're hooked from a young age on stuff that looks really good to them, that tastes really good to them, and they can't refrain from eating it because we're not wired to do that. I mean, we're not wired to refrain from eating things that taste good at all. Like it, if you put a juice box, just pure sugar in front of a child, they're going to eat it because humans are programmed to eat sugar when it's available to us. I mean, I think that any human in nature, if it saw like a bunch of berries, it would eat as many as it could because this would mean that it's, we're preparing for winter time where there might be less food. We should have more body fat on us. I mean, these are biological attributes that are ingrained into us. And so children are, they're really, really, it's a really tragic situation because, you know, the this stuff is just so appealing to them and they get hooked.
Yeah, and the marketing around based on all that, like you mentioned, right? Everything is just the cereal boxes and everything. Everything looks so flashy, and they put cartoons on them, and
Yeah, exactly.
right, it's
Yeah,
just
I think what's it called? Yeah, I mean, we used to have cereal all the time. I mean, that I would eat cereal before I went to school for a couple years, or maybe it was waffles or pancakes or something. It was sugar. It was always sugar, and they always put like the fun, cartoon animals and the tiger, and uh, they put the toys in the boxes, right? Like every time you open a new box, you get something. So I mean, now that the more I think about it, the more it seems to make sense that they want the kids eating them, and it just fuels an addiction. It really does throughout the whole life.
yeah, absolutely. I know that, like, us growing up, especially in the 80s, I think, parents really had no idea in terms of the impact of food on health. And I
Yeah.
think most of the time they still don't, right? But I know, I grew up eating Pop Tarts and
Yeah.
Eggo waffles, and it was just the worst crap you could imagine. And it's hard to believe that, someone could live through decades of that.
No.
But the good thing is that you could reverse it, right? And getting on proper diet. And I really hope that parents will, if there are any vegans listening to this, please reconsider feeding your baby a vegan diet. They need saturated fat, they need cholesterol, they need good animal fat, which is what we evolved on. So yeah, please don't
Yeah.
give them almond milk. Please don't give them soy milk.
Yeah, I mean, my channel is a bit aggressive towards vegans, but it's all really coming from a place of care because I think, it's really, really sad, um, especially when parents, feed their children plant-based diets and, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, if anyone if anyone listening is vegan, please reconsider, especially if your child, yeah.
Leave your hate mail in the comments, but listen to what we're saying here, okay? Joey, I just want to thank you so much for coming on today, man. I love your content. You guys need to check out Carnivore Camaraderie. It's an awesome channel. It's super entertaining. I love your take on things. What can we expect to see from you in the future? I heard that you did an interview with Anthony Chafee, which should come out soon. But
Oh,
any cool things that you're really looking to get into, Joey?
yeah, I mean, tonight I'm going to talk to a guy. This is like one of the coolest guys I've ever met. He's a 54-year-old guy that's been doing carnivore for 40 years. He was 14. He did it as a way to
What?
yeah, he did it to rebel against like the dietary guidelines. I mean, he's like the healthiest looking 54-year-old like you'll ever see. I mean, I have some cool stuff coming up. Gonna go to UCLA soon, which, basically the epicenter of vegan. So it'll be fun. I mean, I'm looking forward to continuing this and spreading the good message.
When you go to UCLA, can you do me one favor? Can you just go to the cafeteria and just film?
Oh yeah, I could
Film
do
what
that.
they got.
Yeah,
Film what
good.
they're giving the students there. I'm very curious.
Yeah, you can do that.
All right, Joe. Okay, thanks so much. I'll link his stuff down below, guys, and stay tuned. Thanks so much.
Thanks.